Nathan Cole canceled the flight at 6:12 a.m., standing barefoot in the kitchen while the coffee machine hummed like a distant engine he had decided not to board. He didn't have a reason he could explain. The presentation in Chicago was ready. His suitcase sat by the door, packed with the kind of precision that came from years of routine. His colleagues were already texting in the group thread about meeting at O'Hare. Still, something felt misaligned, like a door that should have closed but didn't. He stared at the confirmation screen, thumb hovering. Cancel flight? Nathan pressed it before he could talk himself out of it. By 7:03 a.m., Boston was awake. The October air carried that early autumn chill, sharp, honest, impossible to fake. Nathan drove home from Logan instead of toward it, watching commuters merge into traffic like obedient lines of code. He told himself he'd surprise Emily. She liked surprises. At least, she used to. Maybe they'd get breakfast together. Maybe they'd talk, really talk, instead of exchanging logistical updates about their daughter's piano lessons or grocery deliveries. Maybe this strange feeling in his chest would disappear. At 7:41 a.m., Nathan opened the front door. The house smelled wrong. Not bad, just unfamiliar. Vanilla. Something floral layered underneath. Emily didn't use floral scents. He stepped inside quietly, setting his keys down with the same care he used when entering a construction site mid-inspection. From upstairs, he heard movement. Fast movement. A drawer closing, footsteps. Then Emily appeared at the top of the staircase. She was wearing a silk robe he didn't recognize. Her hair wasn't done, but it also wasn't slept in. It looked reset. Her face drained of color when she saw him. You. The word snagged in her throat. Nathan gave a small smile. Trip canceled. Silence. Then she said it. You did not leave? Not, you're back? Not, what happened? Not, is everything okay? You did not leave. Nathan felt something shift internally, a load-bearing beam taking weight it wasn't designed for. No, he said calmly. Meeting got pushed. Thought I'd work from home. Emily didn't move. For a fraction of a second, so small most people would miss it, Nathan saw panic. Real panic. Then, like a professional resetting for camera, she exhaled and smiled. Oh my God, you scared me, she laughed. I thought you forgot something. Nathan nodded. Architects were trained to recognize when a surface had been refinished to hide a crack. By 8:15 a.m., Emily was making avocado toast while filming an Instagram story. Slow mornings are the best mornings, she said brightly into her phone, grateful for time together before busy days. Nathan sat at the kitchen island, watching her frame the shot 3 separate times before posting. She angled the camera to include him. Say hi, she mouthed. He raised the hand. The performance was seamless. If he hadn't been there earlier and hadn't seen her face before it rearranged itself, he would have believed it too. At 9:02 a.m., Emily's phone buzzed. She flipped it over instantly. Too instantly. Nathan looked down at his coffee. Busy today, he asked. Just brand meetings, she replied. Might step out later. Brand meetings. He realized he had no idea what that actually meant anymore. Nathan spent the morning in his home office reviewing blueprints, but he read the same elevation drawing for 43 minutes without seeing it. Instead, he noticed sounds. Emily moving downstairs, a door closing softly, water running then stopping abruptly when he stepped into the hallway. They weren't sounds of guilt. They were sounds of adjustment, like someone recalculating. At 11:26 a.m., he walked past the bedroom. The bed had been remade. Not by their housekeeper. Too soon. The sheets were different. Nathan stood there studying the symmetry. He didn't touch anything. You don't disturb a structure when you're trying to understand how it failed. Nathan didn't feel anger. That was the strangest part. He felt curiosity, and underneath it, grief. Not for something lost, but for something that suddenly, he wasn't sure had ever existed the way he believed it did. That evening, Emily posted a photo of them smiling over dinner. Caption: Unexpected day together. Sometimes the best moments are unplanned. Nathan looked at the image. He could see it now, the angle, the lighting, the careful closeness. 2 people, perfectly framed, standing several inches apart in ways no camera could detect. And somewhere deep inside Nathan Cole, a man who had built his life designing structures meant to last 50 years or more, a question began to form. When did this one start collapsing? Nathan Cole did not begin his investigation deliberately. It happened the way professional instinct always does, quietly, automatically, without emotion. For 20 years, he had trained his eyes to see what others missed. A hairline fracture in concrete, a load path slightly miscalculated, the subtle bow of a wall that meant pressure was accumulating somewhere unseen. Buildings never failed all at once. They whispered first. On Monday morning, Nathan stood in the kitchen pretending to read emails while Emily prepared her usual green smoothie. Except it wasn't usual. She added honey. Emily never added honey. She used to say sugar, even natural sugar, made her feel off-brand. Nathan watched the golden thread dissolve into the blender. A small change. Meaningless if you didn't know the original design. New recipe? He asked. Emily didn't look up. Just trying something different. The answer was casual. Too casual. Like a patch applied without documenting the damage. By Tuesday, Nathan noticed the rhythms. Marriage had rhythms. Predictable circulations of space and time. Who woke first? Who lingered? Who filled silence? Now, Emily woke earlier but stayed in bed longer. Her phone lit the darkness before sunrise. The glow reflected faintly against the headboard, a pale rectangle moving as she typed. When Nathan shifted beside her, she angled the screen away with unconscious precision. Not hiding, positioning. There was a difference. On Wednesday afternoon, Nathan found himself driving past Emily's favorite cafe. He hadn't meant to. His meeting downtown ended early, and his hands turned the steering wheel before his thoughts caught up. The cafe was half full. Students, freelancers, a woman with 2 toddlers negotiating a muffin. Emily wasn't there. That should have meant nothing. Except she had told him she'd be there from 1 to 3. A brand call, she'd said. Nathan sat in the car longer than necessary, watching the door. He wasn't looking for evidence. He was trying to understand why the absence felt louder than presence. At home, Emily greeted him with a kiss that landed precisely at the corner of his mouth. Measured affection. Timed. Nathan had begun to recognize it the way one recognizes prefabricated materials designed to look organic, engineered for efficiency. "How was your day?" she asked. "Productive." "That's good." Neither asked anything further. Their conversations now resembled corporate summaries. No risk, no depth, no deviation. That night, Nathan opened Instagram. He rarely did. Emily's latest post appeared at the top of his feed, a photo of them from the weekend before. She had taken it in their backyard. He remembered the exact moment. The sun had been in his eyes. He'd been thinking about a zoning dispute, not about smiling. But the image told another story. Warmth, ease, intimacy. He looked closer. Emily had edited the light so it fell toward each other, not away. Rewritten physics. The caption read, "Marriage isn't perfect. It's choosing each other again and again." Nathan stared at the sentence. He wondered when they had last chosen anything consciously. By Thursday, observation became habit. Nathan noticed how Emily now kept her phone on silent but checked it constantly, how she volunteered details before he asked, offering explanations that floated strangely, unattached to questions, how she touched him more often in public than in private, performative affection, like decorative columns that bore no weight. Nathan did not search her phone, did not follow her, did not confront her. Instead, he did what he always did when a structure behaved unpredictably. He studied the original blueprints. That evening, while Emily recorded a skincare collaboration upstairs, Nathan sat in his office scrolling through old photos stored on his hard drive. Not the curated ones, the unedited archive. There was Emily at 29, standing barefoot in their first apartment, holding takeout Thai food and laughing at something he'd said. There was no ring light, no branding contract, no careful angles, just motion blur and noise and life. Nathan leaned back in his chair. He realized something unsettling. Back then, Emily hadn't been trying to be seen. Now, being seen was her profession. And somewhere along the way, he had stopped asking who she was when no one was looking. At 9:17 p.m., Emily knocked lightly before entering his office. A new habit. She used to walk in without ceremony. "You're working late again," she said. "Just reviewing some older projects." She stepped closer, resting her hand on his shoulder. The gesture was correct, technically flawless. Nathan placed his hand over hers. Her fingers tensed, just slightly, like someone waiting. For what? A question? An accusation? Permission? Nathan didn't give her any of those. Instead, he asked, "Do you ever feel like we built everything too fast?" Emily's hand withdrew. The silence that followed was not confusion. It was recognition. "I think," she said slowly, "that's just what people do." Nathan nodded. "Yes, that's what people do." They assemble lives the way developers assemble buildings, on schedule, on budget, according to expectation. And sometimes no one checks whether the ground underneath can actually hold the weight. Later that night, Nathan lay awake beside her. Emily slept facing away, her breathing shallow, irregular. Not the deep sleep of someone at peace, more like someone rehearsing rest. Nathan stared at the ceiling. He didn't think, "She's cheating." He thought, "Something has already broken. I just don't know when, or why, or whether it can be repaired." In the darkness, Boston hummed beyond the window's traffic, distant sirens, the low mechanical sound of a city always in motion. Structures everywhere, steel, glass, concrete. All of them dependent on invisible calculations. All of them vulnerable to forces no one saw coming. Nathan closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he decided, he would stop asking whether something was wrong, and start asking what it was trying to become instead. By Friday morning, Nathan understood something he had never been trained to calculate. A building could pretend to stand. It could hold its shape, reflect light beautifully, even win awards, while inside, stress fractures multiplied in silence. And no one would know. Until it didn't. Emily's day began, as always now, with light. Not sunlight, ring light. Nathan stood in the hallway watching the thin white glow spilling from the guest room she had converted into a studio. The door was half open. Inside, Emily adjusted a camera tripod with the care of a surgeon preparing an instrument. "Good morning, guys," she said brightly to no one visible. "I've been getting so many questions about how Nate and I keep our connection strong even with busy schedules." Nathan leaned against the wall. He realized she was talking about him, without knowing he was there. "And honestly," she continued, smiling into the lens, "it's the little rituals. Morning coffee together, checking in, protecting that space." Nathan thought about the mornings they spent in parallel silence, each orbiting separate thoughts. Protecting that space. Yes. They had protected it so well nothing lived there anymore. Emily finished filming and turned. She startled just slightly when she saw him. "Oh, I didn't know you were home. I've been working upstairs." "You should have said hi," she laughed, brushing her hair back. "You scared me." Nathan noticed she said that often now. "You scared me." As if his presence disrupted something carefully arranged. Later that afternoon, Nathan opened Emily's Instagram from his desktop. Not as a husband, as an observer. It's so rare to see a healthy marriage these days. Nathan scrolled. Hundreds of strangers were admiring a structure he now knew was hollow, and the strangest realization settled in. They weren't lying. They were responding to exactly what Emily had built for them to see. A facade isn't deception if it's the only version anyone is shown. That evening, Emily suggested they go out. New place in the seaport, she said. Good lighting. Nathan almost smiled at the phrasing. Not good food, good lighting. The restaurant was all glass and polished brass, the kind of place designed less for conversation and more for visibility. Every table positioned like a display window. Emily took photos before touching her drink. Just 1 second, she murmured. Don't start yet. Nathan waited while she adjusted the angle of their hands beside the plates. Can you move yours closer? He did. Perfect. Click. The moment was captured, then abandoned. They ate in near silence. Halfway through dinner, Emily glanced at her phone. It's already doing well, she said softly. What is? Nathan asked. The post from this morning. People really connect with authenticity. Nathan looked at her. Authenticity. He thought of structural drawings labeled decorative beam. It looked supportive. It carried nothing. On the drive home, Boston blurred past in reflection city lights layered over the windshield like double exposure. Do you ever feel tired? Nathan asked suddenly. Emily frowned. Tired of what? Keeping everything consistent. She hesitated, only a second, but it was the first unperformed pause he'd seen all day. I love what I do, she said carefully. That wasn't an answer. It was branding language. At home, Emily went upstairs to answer emails. Nathan stayed in the living room. He looked around the house they had designed together 10 years earlier. Every line intentional, every material chosen for permanence. It was a beautiful space. Photogenic, balanced, functionally admired. And yet, standing there now, Nathan had the unmistakable sensation of being inside a showroom, not a home. At 10:42 p.m., Emily posted again. A candid shot, she called it. Nathan saw the tripod reflected faintly in the window behind them. He wondered how many other invisible supports existed holding up moments that couldn't stand on their own. When Emily came to bed, she curled beside him with practiced softness. Today was nice, she whispered. Nathan didn't respond immediately. He was thinking about audience, about performance, about how easily two people could begin living not with each other, but toward an imagined crowd. A crowd that would never see the aftermath once the lights went off. Nathan finally said, Do you remember when we didn't document anything? Emily was quiet. I don't, she admitted. And for the first time, that sounded like fear. Nathan stared into the dark. Their marriage hadn't become a lie. It had become content, curated, edited, stabilized, published. And somewhere beyond the frame, something real was happening, something unscripted, something neither of them had yet dared to name. Nathan did not go looking for him. If anything, he expected discovery to arrive violently through a misplaced message, a suspicious charge, some cinematic mistake people made when they were careless. But what he found came quietly, like everything else. The name appeared on a calendar notification Emily had left open on the kitchen iPad. J. Mercer, 11:30 a.m. No emoji, no brand label, no location tag. Just a name. It didn't match the language of her work. Her real meetings always included context, campaign review, creative call, wellness collab. This was different, unadorned, private. Nathan stood there longer than necessary, not touching the screen. He repeated the name in his head the way he memorized materials before approving them for construction. Julian Mercer. He did what any reasonable husband might have done. He searched the name. Not obsessively, just enough. Julian Mercer was not what Nathan expected. No fitness influencer, no aspiring photographer, no bright, reckless disruption. Instead, 51 years old, former venture capitalist, now a consultant in ethical tech development, divorced, one daughter, living in Seattle. Several articles published about burnout culture and digital identity. In one photo, Julian stood at a conference podium. Not charismatic, not imposing, just tired. Not defeated tired, reflective tired. Nathan closed the laptop. He waited for anger to arrive. It didn't. Instead, something far more unsettling surfaced: recognition. The first time Nathan saw Julian in person, it was accidental. At least, it looked that way from the outside. Nathan had taken an unscheduled walk during lunch, following no particular route, only a vague gravitational pull toward Back Bay. He told himself he needed air. But he stopped outside a quiet bookstore cafe he had never visited before, and through the window, Emily sat at a small table. Across from her was Julian Mercer. They weren't touching. They weren't leaning in. There was no visible flirtation. Julian was speaking slowly, hands folded around a ceramic mug. Emily listened, not performing, not nodding for emphasis, not glancing at her phone, just listening. Nathan realized he hadn't seen her do that in years. He should have walked in, should have confronted them, should have demanded something loud and definitive. Instead, he stood across the street, watching two people share silence without trying to fill it. It didn't look like betrayal. It looked like relief. Julian said something that made Emily laugh. Not the bright, camera-ready laugh Nathan knew. A smaller sound, unrehearsed. Nathan felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. That laugh used to belong to their kitchen. Nathan returned home before Emily did. He sat in the living room, not turning on the lights. When she arrived an hour later, she stepped inside carefully, as if adjusting herself to the house. "Hey," she called out. "You home?" "In here." She found him in the dimness. For a moment, neither spoke. "You worked late?" she asked. "No," Nathan said. "I took a walk." Emily nodded. That was all. Two sentences crossing each other like strangers. That night, Nathan searched again, not for proof, but for understanding. He read an essay Julian had written 2 years earlier titled "The Loneliness of Performed Lives." Nathan read it twice. One line stayed with him. "We don't seek affairs because we want another person. We seek them because we want another version of ourselves." Nathan leaned back in his chair. The words did not feel like an attack. They felt like an explanation. Over the following days, Nathan noticed something else. Emily didn't glow after seeing Julian. She didn't become secretive in the dramatic ways stories suggested. If anything, she seemed quieter, as though she had stepped out of noise and hadn't yet figured out how to return. One evening, while they washed dishes together, Emily said suddenly, "Do you ever feel like we skipped something important?" Nathan didn't pretend not to understand. "Yes," he said. She stared at the running water. "I don't know what it was." Neither did he. But for the first time, Nathan understood this wasn't a collision. It was an erosion. Slow, patient, invisible until too much had been carried away. Julian Mercer was not a rival, not an intruder. He was a space, a quiet room Emily had walked into when she could no longer breathe inside the life she had built. Nathan recognized the architecture of that kind of escape. He had designed similar spaces for clients himself, minimalist, intentional, places people went to feel less observed. That realization should have made things easier. It didn't. Because Nathan now faced a truth far more complicated than anger. No one had stolen his marriage. It had drifted, and someone else had simply been there when it did. Late that night, Nathan stood alone in the kitchen. He imagined confronting Julian, but he knew what he would see. Not guilt, not triumph. Only another man trying, just as unsuccessfully, to understand how a life could look complete and still feel uninhabitable. Nathan turned off the lights. In the darkness, the house felt larger than before. Not emptier, just no longer arranged around certainty. For the first time since this began, Nathan asked himself a question that had nothing to do with Emily, or Julian, or betrayal. He asked, "When did I stop being someone she could talk to like that?" And he did not yet know whether the answer would save them or finish dismantling what remained. Memory did not return to Nathan in soft, sentimental waves. It arrived like archived files, time-stamped, precise, disturbingly efficient. Once he began looking backward, he couldn't stop noticing how quickly everything had happened. Not passionately, not chaotically, but efficiently. They met in March, married in November, bought their first condo by February. Nathan used to describe their story as clear. Now, sitting alone in his office, he realized another word fit better: accelerated. The first memory that surfaced was not romantic, it was logistical. They had been sitting at a coffee shop with spreadsheets open, actual spreadsheets. Nathan calculating mortgage options, Emily researching neighborhood appreciation trends. At the time, it had felt like teamwork. "We're good at this," Emily had said, smiling. "We don't waste time." Nathan remembered feeling proud of that. Two people aligned. No drama, no confusion, no questions that slowed momentum. He found an old photo from that year. They were standing inside the empty condo before moving in. Sunlight poured across the hardwood floors. Emily was already talking about where to place furniture. Nathan was thinking about load-bearing walls. Neither of them had asked, "How do we want to live here?" They asked only, "How do we make this work?" Success followed the same pattern. Nathan's firm expanded. Promotions came predictably. Emily transitioned from marketing into digital content when Instagram began reshaping industries. It wasn't a leap. It was a pivot. Strategic, timely, smart. Nathan remembered congratulating her like a colleague. "You're building something scalable," he had said. She laughed. "You make everything sound like a project." But that's exactly what it became. Flashbacks layered themselves one over another. Their first anniversary dinner cut short because Nathan had an early presentation. Emily's first viral post celebrated with takeout eaten beside open laptops. The night they decided to try for a child, scheduled between two work deadlines, discussed with the calm practicality of planning a renovation. They weren't unhappy. That was the dangerous part. They were functioning. Nathan began to see it clearly now. They had built a life the same way developers build in fast-growing cities. Maximize space, streamline process, avoid delays. Emotion, like ornamental detail, became optional. One evening from years ago returned with uncomfortable clarity. They had attended a friend's wedding in Vermont. There was music, drunken dancing, the messy, unpredictable joy of people who didn't care about appearing composed. Emily had pulled Nathan toward the dance floor. "Come on," she said, "just for a minute." Nathan had hesitated. "I have an early meeting Monday," he replied, half joking. Emily let go of his hand. "Right," she said. At the time, it seemed insignificant. Now it felt like a blueprint note. Connection deferred. Another memory surfaced. The first time Emily hired a photographer to document their home for content. Nathan had walked in to find lighting equipment set up in their living room. "It's just temporary," she explained. "This is part of growing." Nathan nodded. Growth made sense to him. He didn't notice that from then on, moments were arranged before they were lived. Sitting in the present, Nathan understood the deeper problem. They hadn't ignored each other. They had optimized each other, encouraged productivity, stability, advancement. They removed friction. But friction, he realized now, is where intimacy lives. Without it, nothing catches fire. Late that night, Nathan found a box in the back of their closet. Inside were things Emily had saved before their lives became streamlined. Ticket stubs, handwritten notes, a postcard Nathan once mailed her during a short trip early in their relationship. The handwriting startled him. Messy, personal, unedited. Not like the polished emails he sent now. At the bottom of the box was a note Emily had written years ago. "Let's promise not to become one of those couples who only talks about logistics." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed holding that sentence. There was no betrayal in it. Only hope. Hope neither of them had noticed fading. Emily walked into the bedroom and stopped when she saw the box. "I forgot we still had that," she said quietly. Nathan looked up. "Why did we stop keeping things like this?" Emily didn't answer immediately. She sat beside him, fingers brushing an old photograph. "I think," she said slowly, "we thought we were replacing them with bigger things. The house, the careers, the audience, the life that looked undeniable from the outside." Nathan closed the box. He finally understood something that had eluded him since the morning he canceled the flight. Nothing had been broken suddenly. They had simply constructed everything so quickly, so carefully, so rationally, that they never paused to ask who they were becoming inside it. And by the time they noticed the silence, they had already learned how to live with it. In the quiet of the room, neither Nathan nor Emily moved. For once, there was nothing to optimize, nothing to schedule, nothing to fix. Only the unsettling realization that success had carried them exactly where they had intended to go, just not where they had meant to be. Nathan did not confront Emily. He did not ask questions, did not demand explanations, did not search for proof. Instead, he did something far more disruptive. He stayed. He came home earlier. He worked at the dining table instead of the office. He asked ordinary questions and waited for real answers. He occupied the shared spaces of their life with a steadiness that could not be edited, postponed, or reframed. At first, Emily responded the way she always had, efficiently. "How was your meeting?" "Good." "Did you eat?" "Yes." But Nathan did not allow the conversation to end there. He followed the answers. "What made it good?" "What did you order?" Silence began appearing between them. Not the old silence of avoidance, but a new one. A silence that required thought. Emily was not prepared for it. On Tuesday morning, she set up her camera in the kitchen, positioning a bowl of fruit near the window where the light fell softly across the marble countertop. She checked the framing, adjusted the exposure, then noticed Nathan sitting at the table, reading through a set of sketches. "You're in the shot," she said. "That's okay," he replied without looking up. "I kind of need a clean background." Nathan considered this, then closed the folder slowly. "This is the background." Emily lowered the camera. Something in his tone made it impossible to argue without sounding unreasonable. She turned the equipment off. The post never got made. That afternoon, Nathan suggested they take a walk along the Charles River. Emily almost said she had emails to answer, then stopped herself. The excuse felt thin even before she spoke it. They walked without documenting it. No photos, no captions, no pauses to adjust angles. The city moved around them, runners passing, wind stirring fallen leaves, the low hum of traffic crossing the bridge. It was not a remarkable walk. That was precisely what made it unfamiliar. "We used to do this more," Nathan said. Emily nodded. "Before everything got busy." Nathan looked out at the water. "Or before we decided everything was busy." Emily didn't respond. She understood what he meant, and the understanding unsettled her. Over the next few days, Nathan continued this quiet shift. He cooked dinner without announcing it. He asked about her work and listened without turning it into analysis or advice. He sat beside her in the evenings instead of retreating behind screens. There was no accusation in any of it, and that, more than anger, would have made Emily uneasy. One night, she found herself watching him from the doorway of the living room. Nathan was sketching by hand, not using the precise software he relied on at the office. The drawing was loose, exploratory, imperfect. "You don't usually work like that," she said. "I used to," he answered, "before I convinced myself efficiency was the same as care." Emily leaned against the doorframe. "What made you stop?" Nathan looked up at her, not defensive, not wounded, just present. "I thought I was building us a stable life," he said. "I didn't notice I was designing it to run without us." The words landed harder than any confrontation could have. Emily felt, for the first time in months, the fragile structure she had been balancing begin to tilt. Julian had been a space where she didn't feel evaluated. Nathan, suddenly, was no longer evaluating either. He was simply there, asking nothing, avoiding nothing. It left her with nowhere to hide. She met Julian 2 days later at the same quiet cafe. He saw it immediately. "You look like someone turned the lights on," he said gently. Emily stirred her coffee without drinking it. "Nathan knows something. Not about us, just something." Julian waited. "He's different," she continued. "He's actually there, talking, listening. I don't know what to do with that." Julian nodded, not surprised. "That's harder than anger." Emily looked up. "Why?" "Because anger gives you roles, someone to blame, someone to resist." He paused. "Presence doesn't." They sat in silence for a moment. "This was never about replacing him," Julian said. "You know that." Emily closed her eyes briefly. She did know. That was what made everything so much more complicated. When she returned home that evening, Nathan was in the kitchen attempting a recipe neither of them had tried before. The counters were messy. "The measurements imprecise. You're making a disaster," she said. Nathan smiled. "Probably." She hesitated, then stepped beside him. "You forgot to heat the pan first." "Show me," he replied, handing her the spatula. They moved around each other awkwardly at first, relearning distances that once had been instinctive. Their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. No music played, no camera recorded the moment. Nothing translated it into something shareable. It existed only there. Later, as they ate the unevenly cooked meal, Emily felt a pressure building inside her. Not fear of being discovered, but fear of continuing without telling the truth. Nathan did not ask where she had been earlier. He did not ask who she had seen. He simply said, "This isn't very good." Emily laughed, surprised by the sound. "No," she admitted, "it isn't." And for a moment, the honesty of that small failure felt larger than all the perfection they had performed for years. That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Nathan slept beside her. She realized she no longer knew which version of their life was real, the one she had escaped from, or the one quietly reforming around them. The difference now was that Nathan was no longer trying to fix anything. He was allowing it to be seen. And that, Emily understood with a growing sense of inevitability, meant she would soon have to decide whether to step fully back into this life or admit that she had already left it long before Nathan canceled that flight. The confession did not come out of discovery. It came out of exhaustion. For weeks, Emily had lived inside a pressure she could not name. Nathan never accused her, never searched her phone, never asked where she had been. Instead, he watched her with a kind of calm attention that made performance impossible. There was no audience to persuade, no argument to defend against. Only presence. And presence, Emily realized, was merciless. On a gray Sunday morning, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than necessary. The house was quiet. Nathan had gone out to buy groceries, leaving a handwritten list on the counter instead of sending a text. The note ended with, "Back soon. Don't start the coffee without me." It was such a small sentence. It undid her. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, the silence of the house pressing in. For years, she had filled silence with activity, with posts, with proof that life was happening. Now there was nothing to fill, nothing to hide behind. When Nathan returned, he found her exactly there, still sitting, still holding that piece of paper. He set the grocery bags down slowly. "Emily?" She looked up. Her expression wasn't panicked, it was something far more fragile. "I don't know how to do this," she said. Nathan didn't pretend not to understand. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat, leaving the space between them intact. "Then don't do it well," he replied. "Just do it honestly." That was all the permission she needed. "There's someone," Emily said. The words came carefully, without drama. "It didn't start the way you think. It wasn't supposed to become anything. I just couldn't breathe anymore. And with him, I didn't have to be anyone." Nathan absorbed the sentence the way he would absorb a structural report, without interruption, without visible reaction. "Julian," he said quietly. Emily nodded. "You knew." "I knew there was a space you were going to," Nathan answered. "I didn't know what you found there." Emily's hands trembled. "I found quiet. I found someone who didn't expect me to prove that my life was good. We talked. Sometimes we didn't talk at all, and that felt like relief." She paused, searching for language that didn't sound like justification. "It wasn't about leaving you. It was about escaping the version of myself I had become with you." Nathan leaned back, exhaling slowly. The truth hurt, but not in the sharp way betrayal is supposed to hurt. It was heavier than that. Like realizing a building had been sinking for years beneath ground no one thought to examine. "I helped build that version," he said. Emily shook her head. "We both did." "That's what makes it worse." They sat with that acknowledgement, neither trying to soften it. "I kept waiting for you to confront me," Emily continued. "I thought if you yelled or demanded answers, it would make sense again. I could apologize. We could call it a mistake. But you didn't do that. You just showed up. And I didn't know how to hide from that." Nathan looked at her. "I wasn't trying to punish you." "I know," she whispered. "That's why it worked." Outside, a car passed through the wet street, tires hissing against asphalt. The ordinary sound underscored how undramatic the moment really was. No shattered glass, no raised voices. Just two people sitting in the aftermath of something they had both, in different ways, allowed to happen. "Are you still seeing him?" Nathan asked. Emily hesitated, then answered truthfully. "No, not since I realized I couldn't stay divided like that. He didn't ask me to choose. He said I had to decide what was real before anything else." Nathan nodded. That sounded like the man he had observed through the cafe window. Not a thief, just another person who had stepped into an empty room. Emily wiped her eyes, frustrated by the tears. "I don't even know if we can fix this. I don't know if there's anything to go back to." Nathan considered that. "Maybe there isn't," he said. "But I don't think we're supposed to go back." The words hung there, uncertain but sincere. For the first time, Emily understood that this was not a negotiation for the old marriage. That structure was gone. What remained was the possibility of building something neither of them knew how to design yet. "Then what happens now?" she asked. Nathan gave a faint, tired smile. "Now we find out whether there's anything here when we stop pretending." That afternoon, they did something they had not done in years. They took down the framed photographs in the hallway. Not out of anger, but because both of them wanted to see the walls without curated memories dictating what the house was supposed to mean. The blank spaces looked strange, honest, unfinished. Emily ran her hand along one of the pale rectangles where a frame had shielded the paint from light. "It's ugly," she said. "It's new," Nathan corrected. They stood there together, looking at the marks left behind by years of careful presentation. Neither of them knew yet what would replace them, but for the first time, nothing was being arranged for anyone else to see. Winter arrived without ceremony. Boston did not announce the season so much as settle into it. The light thinned, the air sharpened. The city's edges became clearer, less forgiving. Inside the house on Marlborough Street, nothing had been repaired, and nothing had been demolished. Nathan and Emily moved through their days like occupants of a place still under construction. They did not discuss the future. They discussed groceries, schedules, whether the radiator in the guest room was making that noise again. Ordinary conversations, stripped of the careful polish they once carried. The absence of performance was not freeing in the way Emily had imagined. It was uncomfortable, exposed, sometimes unbearably plain, but it was real. Emily posted less. At first she told herself it was intentional, a recalibration of her brand. Then she stopped pretending it had anything to do with strategy. She simply did not know how to photograph a life that no longer arranged itself into pleasing symmetry. One afternoon she opened the app, stared at the blank caption field, and closed it again. There was nothing she could write that wouldn't feel like translation instead of truth. Nathan, meanwhile, returned to work with a different kind of attention. He still designed buildings, still reviewed plans and calculations, but he found himself lingering over questions he once dismissed. How would people move through this space? Where would they pause? What would make a room feel inhabited instead of impressive? His colleagues noticed the change without understanding it. "You're slowing down," one of them said during a meeting. Nathan nodded. Yes, it was not an apology. At home, he and Emily developed new habits not because they had decided to, but because neither knew how to return to the old ones. They cooked more, badly at first. They argued occasionally, but even their arguments felt different. Less like rehearsed disagreements, more like two people testing unfamiliar language. One night, while washing dishes, Emily said, "Do you ever wish we could just decide what this is going to be?" Nathan handed her a towel. "We tried that once." She smiled faintly. "Right, that didn't work." They stood side by side drying plates. Outside, snow had begun to fall, muting the usual sounds of traffic. The city looked softer, though nothing about winter was gentle. "I don't know if we stay married," Emily said after a while, "or if we become something else. I don't even know what success looks like anymore." Nathan considered that. For most of his life, success had meant stability, endurance, the absence of visible failure. Now those definitions felt insufficient. "Maybe success," he said slowly, "is not deciding too quickly." Emily looked at him. "That sounds like something you never would have said before." "I know." That was the only answer he had. They did not reconcile in any cinematic sense. There was no declaration of renewed love, no promise that everything would be better. Some days were heavy with doubt. Some mornings they woke up unsure how to speak to each other. There were still moments when Emily thought about Julian, not with longing, but with the complicated gratitude one feels towards someone who appeared at a necessary breaking point. Nathan understood that without needing to hear it aloud. Life continued, not dramatically, but persistently. The rhythms of the city returned after each snowfall. Deadlines accumulated. Their daughter called from college with stories that had nothing to do with either of them. Time moved forward because it always does, and gradually, something unfamiliar began to exist between them. Not the polished partnership they once displayed, not the silent distance that had followed, something smaller, uncertain, honest enough to be uncomfortable. One evening in early March, they sat in the living room with no television, no phones, no attempt to fill the quiet. The walls were still missing several photographs. They had not decided what, if anything, would replace them. Emily rested her head back against the couch. This still feels unfinished. Nathan looked around the room. It is. Does that bother you? He thought about all the years he had chased completion, the satisfaction of a project sealed and delivered. Yes, he admitted. Then, after a pause, but I think I'm learning to live with that. Emily turned toward him. Me too. There was no resolution in the moment, no clarity about where they would end up, only the shared recognition that whatever came next would not be constructed for appearance or speed or approval. If they stayed together, it would be because they chose to remain inside this unfinished space. If they separated, it would not be an escape, but another kind of truth. Outside, the last of the snow was beginning to melt, water tracing unpredictable paths along the street, finding its way not through design, but through gravity. Nathan watched it for a long time before speaking. We can't rebuild what we had, he said. Emily nodded. I know. But we can decide, he continued, whether we want to see what grows here instead. Emily did not answer right away. She reached for his hand, not as a promise, not as forgiveness, but as a gesture still searching for meaning. Their fingers remained loosely intertwined, not held, not released. And in that quiet, unresolved space, their story continued, not finished, not fixed, but finally lived without an audience.